I don't know exactly how to get started with this topic. Um, I just wanted to come on today and talk about something sort of unplanned, some thoughts that have been brewing in my head for a while. I really wanted to stream today, but struggled to come up with something more organized to do, and I didn't want to quite get back to the John Keats uh, poetry reading thing yet. So this is a way to do something that's a little bit more um, a little bit more philosophy because that's sort of that's what I was craving basically. Um, and oh my god, okay, audio is so complicated with this new microphone setup. Um, anyway, so I want to talk about a couple of perspectives on suffering and lack and the idea of nothingness in a sort of disorganized, disconnected way. Um, so there are there are two views on suffering and lack that are worth taking seriously. Um, and I think really only these two views. And there's different like ways that you can approach these views and articulate them and make use of them. And that is true. But fundamentally there are really only two views. And one of them is the uh I guess I could say the religious view. Um and the other is uh, the philosophical view, perhaps I could say. Um, although neither of them is restricted exclusively to these domains. Um, in if you happen to be familiar with um, the antinomies of apocalyptic humanism from Transcendental Kabbalah, this is the question of the felix culpa. Although I guess it actually ties into a couple of other of those antinomies, but that's sort of what we're talking about today. So these thoughts sort of come because I was very struck by the work of David Bentley Hart. So David Bentley Hart is a um, philosopher who is very interested. He's Eastern Orthodox Christian, but only sort of barely. Uh, and his book Beauty of the Infinite is one of the most powerful and provocative and just beautiful works of philosophy that I've ever read. And it's sort of like a confrontation between uh, like Trinitarian theology and uh, continental philosophy from the 20th century, like Nietzsche onward, especially. He has a very keen interest in Nietzsche. Um, and the central thrust of his book is that he argues that all attempts at although he elaborates this a little bit more clearly in some of his other work, but um any like all philosophy Christianity is offers itself as an alternative to all philosophies that are based on lack and um nothingness and uh like even in a way like um like distinctions between uh like um truth and simulacra in a way like his very provocative thesis is that like trinitarian theology is the only way to be properly non-dual um and one of the things that he says in there and in his other works that is most interesting is basically the divine God's divine impassibility is what it's called. But like God being infinitely happy and infinitely perfect and infinitely loving, like God being absolutely complete and without lack in themselves. number one. And number two, that God, understood properly, is a sort of panentheistic God, that like God is the only true reality. Um, that like suffering does not enter into true reality in any sort of way. And that like, now what exactly is suffering and how is it distinct from just like negative experiences is something that I'll get into in a minute. Um, and that there is just at the base of things, just this absolute unassailable perfection and abundance, and that there is this potential for reality being an endless series of um, just kind of like baroque, uh, like counter, like very elaborate baroque counterpoints on a central theme of love, and that like there is no real need for suffering, and that like God does not need suffering or pain. Like these, be careful with the word pain. So God does not need suffering in order to bring us to our fullest selves, to bring the world into its fullest self, and that the Christian story is one where we're being rescued from an absolute contingency somehow. That like the world being fucked up is absolutely contingent, and like um we can learn lessons from it, but it's not like stuff is wrong to show us a lesson. It's not like stuff is wrong to teach us anything. Like God would never hurt us. Is would be another simple way to put what he's saying. Like God would never hurt us because it's always wrong to hurt someone. Um, and like trying to like God is and only is that which is rescuing us from suffering. Um, and so this is a perspective that he argues very persuasively, and that I think is um, uh, one that is sort of necessary to have in mind. Um, that like God can heal anything, and uh, there is no truth in suffering, that like it doesn't have, it's not something that we need to find meaning in. It's a thing that we move away from. um and this uh and basically, and one of the consequences of this thought is that if we inject like lack or suffering into the divine, it handicaps our ability to love, basically, to love and to grow and to imagine a better world. Because to imagine like the world really being redeemed requires us to be called beyond like lack and limitation, and um and to really hope that we don't have to hold on to these things that we have to hold on to. Like it calls us towards this sort of letting go. um and that uh and that like there is a sort of infinite self, there's a sort of infinite wellspring of joy that is possible in self-giving. um and that to imagine it negatively is uh is just a very severe limitation. And that it's a severe limitation for like progressive intellectual thought, and uh that like imagining it as necessary creates a whole, it makes every intellectual system one of violence instead of peace. Anyway, I talked about this way too long. So to move on to the other view, which I guess to me I associate it most closely with psychoanalysis, but it's actually sort of the more common view in a way, is that um, suffering exists to teach us something, and like um, that. uh, we can and should learn lessons from suffering, and that in some ways suffering is necessary for um, a certain kind of like in order to access deeper experiences, and that um, we have been given pain as a gift in a way, and um, like you can think about this like in how a lot of the most powerful and beautiful art comes from people, and perhaps all powerful and beautiful art has come from people who have experienced really traumatic things that threw them out of loop and really fucked with them and kind of gave them a side perspective on the world. Um, and called and were called to like a deeper level of intensity and understanding, and that there is something that suffering can do to kind of break you out of of uh, of the world. Um, and uh, and that this is like a mysterious this is and so that this is a mysterious thing that doesn't always happen, but like it's posited as some and depending on who you're hearing it from, they will posit it at like different levels of necessity with how they talk about it, but the fundamental, like a lot of it is often taken as a fundamental truth that even if it's unspoken, that it's really not possible to do without um suffering, and um and you can think about this sort of abstractly and so it's not quite the same thing, but you can connect it to the idea of like lack and a negative pole, like in order to see how good something could be, like you get this sense, you get a contrast um for something to be distinct against, uh and um or like you can also think about like systems of like thought and language and like um ideas that are presented to you in the world and images that are presented to you in the world, like all contain uh um you can understand them as having something missing, like and they because none of them are God, right? Like none of them are really complete. Everything is on a movement towards the ultimate, like reality, like the ultimate complete reality that is God, like or at least all things that are authentic or oriented towards this. But by necessity of them not being this, they're missing something of God. Like not all of God is there, um, and uh, and like it is this, and so a lot of this question comes down to like what how violent is this uh what is the nature of this kind of gap between God and the world, um and you can posit that like the world is like um oh my god, okay, maybe I should have planned more before I started this video. um and so this comes into the and so there is and so this comes to the idea of nothingness. So what, let's talk about nothingness. So like um active nothingness, we could maybe think about like pure nothingness and active nothingness, would be one way that we could sort of think about this. So um active nothingness is like um nothingness kind of posited as having like some sort of substantial life of its own, like it's sort of like entropy, like it sort of it breaks things down, it like spreads, it grows, it's and like but it's and in a way it is able to sort of guide because of this. Like, and you can be tapped into it at uh, points that various systems like break down, and there's something like um, productive and like beautiful, or really the word would be sublime here. Like there's something that's like beyond beauty, seemingly. Now that's another question, but like there's something sublime about coming into contact with this nothingness. But then there is um nothing, like pure nothingness. And so this is the nothingness. This is nothingness is sort of understood by the second view that I espoused earlier. Nothingness is understood in the first view, which David Bentley Hart, which I sort of described from David Bentley Hart. So a very important thing, I guess the kind of very relevant idea here is like creation is creation from nothingness. Like true, authentic creation is creation from nothingness. Um, and like this is like God creating the world was a creation from nothingness. And our authentic creation, when we create authentically, we are actually bringing something into reality that was not previously there, or um, perhaps only previously existed in the mind of God. Um, and like, but uh, and those seem very different, but actually are not so much. Um, but perhaps they are. But the so um uh so pure nothingness. So basically in David Bentley Hart's conception, like the world has no creation out of nothingness for David Bentley Hart um means that the world has no support of its own. The world is nothing. The world exists entirely within God. Like the world is like only not God by a pure distinction, like absolutely the only pure distinction. And this pure distinction has gives us a space for absolute freedom. So in um, God the Father for David Bentley Hart is like this pure difference that is never able to be mirrored perfectly or approached perfectly, but like that this is fine. Like you can only go higher and higher and higher, and that this is like beautiful and good, and like this yearning for it um is good. And there is um the second person of the Trinity, that there is a Trinity, so that there is the Son who is a perfect reflection of the Father, and that there is um this moment of pure reality and brought to fruition and reflection in the Son is the third person in themselves in the Holy Spirit. Like this idea is signals basically um, that being not God is not a diminution. It's it or a violence. It is like we aren't ripped from God. We aren't the result of a wound. We are like pure gift. And like you can just say this and um and that's all well and good, but it is something that you have to like train to feel and see in yourself and in the world. Like that doesn't remove that aspect somehow. um and uh that this is what authentic religious practice is calling towards, and that um the resurrection of the bodily resurrection of Christ um points towards this, that like um death and and this nothingness, like we try to make it real, but it isn't, like it doesn't have any substantial content of its own. But this leaves open the question of why why does it exist at all, like um and that question is nagging and painful, and really doesn't have um an answer consistent with this view. Um, it does not have an answer consistent with this view, and uh, this is actually a huge pain point for David Bentley Hart that comes across in his work often. Like he's very clearly trying to evade this. And if you read some of his other like side works on his Substack and stuff, and like you learn a little bit more about him in his personal life, it's really he really fails to figure out a way to integrate this, and he basically fights hope against hope that like you it's something that you don't have to integrate, and that trying to integrate it is a trap and evil, essentially. Trying to posit that the nothingness has a place is a trap and evil. Whereas the second view um, is that it does have a place. Like it does have a place. Like that there is the process of differentiation from God is active and painful, but that is or at least can be okay. Like that the pain is somehow necessary. Um, and uh, and basically, I think that keeping both of these in your mind is simply important. Um, because I think you have to be able to think the first one in order to really think like and so I guess maybe perhaps I should offer some defense of the first one. Um, uh, and um basically a really so there's two the first way is to say I can't really defend it. It's not like intellectually consistent or tidy in any way. Like to think to imagine perfection because you can think of all it creates all sorts of logical paradoxes and this is just like one obvious one. Um, and uh, that you simply have to rely on revelation and personal spiritual experience, like the experience of like the infinite abundance available in reality somehow, and the love of God and God's perfection is something that has been revealed to people and is like it's available as experience if you actually if you pray, if you participate in religious practice and you do good works. This is a thing that you can experience in your life and you can experience in a growing way. And I have personal experience of this. Like I have doubts about, whether this is just like a trick, this is just like the pursuit of the oceanic feeling, that is like it's this it's the desire for like early childhood care and like the sense of oneness with the mother before you're split off as an independent ego or whatever. But I I simply believe that God is real and um that uh we should attempt to try to trust this message because it's it's loving and um and it's powerful. Um and then another a way to try to get at it intellectually is basically very very brief. The Our ability to think infinity and to tap into infinity um like shows us that there is a sort of infinite reality that is available. There is this infinity, this real abundance that we have access to. And it just doesn't make sense for that to be dependent on the finite in any way. Like um and uh it being dependent on the finite, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It would render it lacking. It would render it not real. And yet it is something that we can conceive, something that clearly like shows up and guides us. And if you follow like your question of like why you want something, anything, why you like what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, like or any like joy in your heart, um, or any like really rigorous intellectual engagement with the world, it leads you back to this kind of source. Um, and I don't really know what to make of it, um, in light of this other thing that I said, that there's something, that there is this kind of very strange, messy relationship that it has, that it seems to have with finitude. It really does seem, it's very hard to grasp how God could be lacking nothing. Um, but and the and it certainly seems to open us up to this depth of experience, and one sort of way to try to synthesize these, in a sort of soft way, would be to say that, um, in heaven, uh, there will be there will be pain, but not lasting, ongoing pain that can't be forgiven, that can't be healed, that can't let go, and that we could really only have pain that could be healed from, and that could open us up to a depth of experience, and that this is something that like we would gain like this sovereign ability to um consent to, um and like this, uh it would be something that we would be able to choose, and um and that as far as all the suffering and pain we see in the world now, and all this finitude now, that like people dying and suffering really will, like, there really is, um there really is eternal life, and perhaps even just as simple as incarnation. But this, I think there's also like a very specific, like, um Tomberg in Meditations on the Tarot argues that reincarnation is, you're being reincarnated, and over time you're accumulating things that will all eventually add up to like your heavenly body, um in part, uh but that there is just so much joy and like perspective that can be offered, that any suffering that has been endured can be forgiven, and can be rewarded, like, and replaced with with so much of a higher understanding and um insight, that anything could be made to be worth it, um could be shown to be worth it, and that it's actually very, like, it's actually very kind of limited and uh, narcissistic perspective to, um, I don't know about narcissistic. It's a very limited perspective to think that, um, no matter how horrible anything that happens in the world is, like, to think that the world could not be so different, and that God could not offer so much mercy and perspective and like love, that um this sort of thing could be integrated, and um and of course I don't think this means that one uh should, you know give up on trying to alleviate suffering in the world, or not see its like relative uh pain. And then I this is, this goes back to the first perspective, right? This is this sort of learning to balance these two. um well, I'm not really satisfied with these thoughts, but that's what we got.